I brought a little something for you, Mother. Here it is. I watched closely as Luca handed a cake box to my mother with a forced smile. I felt a chill in my heart when I saw Luca smiling as if he had just pasted his smile on his face, and I quickly took the cake box away from him. When I opened the box a little and checked the contents, I threw it in the trash. Hey! What are you doing? Luca and my mother looked at me in unison and expressed their anger at what had happened in front of them. What's the matter? I asked, looking at my mother with disbelief. Did you see what's inside the cake? Huh? My mother started to tremble at the unexpected question, as if she hadn't expected it. I glared at Luca to confirm whether my suspicions were true. Luca grimaced, clearly regretting something. It looks like I was right after all. I clenched my fists to get back at Luca. My name is Bella Gray. I'm 36 years old and work as a caregiver. Despite the busy daily routine, I often find myself exhausted, leaving for work early in the morning and returning home late at night. I knew it was physical work, so I had no choice, but I was also crossing paths with my husband, Luca, whom I married a year ago. Since Luca works as a long-distance driver, his working hours are often irregular, which is one of the reasons why my husband and I often see each other. In any case, we know that it is a marital problem that needs to be resolved as soon as possible, but work is work for both of us, making it difficult to talk about it. Our initial encounter was through mutual friends. Being shy in matters of love, I had declined invitations to socialize after work since taking up the caregiving job. It was not in my character to actively go looking for a lover, and above all, I was too tired from work to go out to such places with light footwork. My friends of my generation were of marriageable age and desperate to get a man. Even if tired from work, it seems they were compartmentalizing, seeking connections separately in work and romantic aspects of life. Having been running away from romance with the fighting spirits of my friends by my side, I finally became anxious when I was over 30, and suddenly everyone was reporting their marriages and childbirths. This is not good as it is. Despite being reserved in romance, there was a strong desire to get married in the future. Therefore, I asked a friend who once invited me to go on a blind date with her to introduce me to a man of my age. That someone turned out to be Luca. 2 years older than me, Luca was always calm and composed, providing a sense of maturity. I like him with one look, because what I needed was not fiery love, but a calm and unaffected marriage. Our interests matched, and from there, we got together and got married a year ago. However, our married life began with us living together, sharing a home with my mother, Alice. Since I lacked a father figure, I felt it was right not to leave my mother alone after getting married. Initially, I thought Luca would resist the idea of living with my mother, but surprisingly, he accepted it without much trouble. While I successfully got married and lived with my mother, I was relieved that everything had come full circle, but then an unexpected turn of events awaited me. As someone who had just gotten married, it was something I couldn't have foreseen. As if to mark the marriage of Luca and me, an incident occurred at my workplace. Employees at my workplace quit in quick succession. Several employees resigned in quick succession, each with their own reasons. Some have left the company on their own, while others have quit, saying they wanted to change careers in a different field. Although they probably never consulted with each other and quit all at once, the result was that the remaining people had to take on twice as much work as before. As a result, I found myself returning home even later than before, leading to more instances of passing by Luca in our daily lives. One evening, when Luca, my mother, and I finally sat down together for dinner after a long time, I sensed an unusually heavy atmosphere in the house. Luca, did you take care of that matter the other day? What matter was that again? Well, did you forget? I told you to open an account at M-Bank. No, right. I forgot. Sorry. What's the matter? I reminded you so many times, and you forget something like this. My mother sighed in frustration at Luca. It seemed there was an exchange between them that I was unaware of, and Luca had forgotten to fulfill my mother's request. What's this about the bank? Well, you also have an account at M-Bank, Bella. I think it's a good idea for Luca to have one too, considering the uncertainties in the future. But he doesn't seem to listen at all. Sorry. I really just forgot. Is that so? Well, if that's the case. Indeed, I had an account at M-Bank. My mother had been depositing a small amount each month for emergencies. Presumably, she intended to do the same for Luca in the future. However, Luca seemed to perceive my mother's request merely as a command to open an account without understanding the underlying intention. My mother had a somewhat bad habit. Her way of speaking was brusque, and it often came across as cold. As a result, communication between Luca and her frequently ended up in misunderstandings. As it happens, I have not been able to have a good conversation with my mother lately, and I have often had fights with her. Come on, Luca is busy. You don't have to say it so harshly. You always say such carefree things, even though I'm desperately trying to convey something you don't understand. Sigh. My mother not only had a harsh tone but quickly became emotional. So, at this moment, she seemed frustrated that her daughter couldn't comprehend her kindness. That night in our bedroom, Luca said to me, "Your mother is always scolding me. She gives me nonsensical orders, like getting insurance or making investments until you come home. I'm exhausted from work, and I really can't stand hearing it every day. Mom used to worry a lot when she didn't have money. She's just advising you to secure our future. Please, try to listen to her a bit." Knowing my mother's feelings, I desperately tried to calm down Luca, who was complaining. While Luca outwardly handled my mother without causing trouble, he seemed to harbor resentment toward her internally. Of course, I understood Luca's feelings. Being endlessly subjected to discussions about uninteresting topics and receiving commands would be irritating. However, my mother, in her own way, was thinking about Luca's and our financial stability, offering advice for our well-being. That kind of talk is annoying. Insurance and investments, I'll do them when I want to. Besides, using an account at M-Bank just for savings or investments, right, you can't open multiple accounts at the same bank nowadays, and it's so obvious what she wants. Luca, usually calm and composed, became highly emotional when it came to my mother. Noticing Luca's irritation, I couldn't help but sigh, wondering how to resolve the situation. Oh well, it would be nice if we could live separately. Then I wouldn't have to hear those annoying complaints. Wait a minute. Luca knew I didn't want to leave my mother alone. Making such a mean-spirited comment, even as a joke, seemed a bit too much. Just kidding. Anyway, I'm just going along with what she says. Create the account or whatever. Finally, with a dismissive tone, Luca lay back on the bed in a sulky manner. Without further words, I lay down next to Luca, feeling a sense of frustration. And so, our cohabitation continued, with our feelings remaining misunderstood as we approached the 1-year mark. Just as I thought the monotonous days would continue, an unexpected event occurred. Cancer. Yes, it is. It's so crazy, isn't it? I can't believe I have cancer at this age. One day, returning home earlier than usual, my mother casually revealed that she had been diagnosed with cancer. Luca hadn't returned yet, and it seemed to be just the right timing for my mother. Is that so? Are you okay? Is it quite advanced? Well, it doesn't seem that serious yet. But I'm going to have surgery soon, so I'll be hospitalized temporarily. Can you handle household chores? My mother, who worries more about my ability to do housework than her own surgery, doesn't know whether to be kind or meddlesome. Either way, for some reason, I felt irresistibly irritated with my mother, who was more concerned about trivial things than her own health. Of course I can handle it. How old do you think am I? What, you're being so perverse when people are worried about you. I don't need to be told such things. I have no problem with housework. Please take care of your disease as soon as possible, Mom. I don't know what I need to get so upset about, but the fact that my mother had cancer was more painful than I thought it would be. Unable to be straightforward and offer kind words to my mother, I found myself frustrated once again. Yes, I get it. Luca would listen more obediently, you know. My mother doesn't know what Luca thinks behind her back. So, seeing Luca's seemingly obedient agreement with my mother's requests on the surface, he thinks Luca is his ally. Despite scolding Luca firmly at times, he doesn't seem genuinely angry. In fact, Luca seems to be insincere with my mother, never taking her words seriously. I want to expose this, but in my current position, I can't say anything to my mother. The true ally is not Luca but me, yet I can only whisper it in my mind. After my mother's cancer diagnosis, the news of surgery was eventually conveyed to Luca by my mother. I don't know how Luca reacted, but seeing my mother's calm expression before going to bed reassured me in a comforting way. In reality, Luca seems to play along with my mother without taking her words seriously. "Hey, how bad is your mom's disease?" All I was told was, "It's not that bad." I see. Luca, clearly dissatisfied, responded with a meaningful expression. I went to bed that night, soothing my restless heart. From that day on, conversations with Luca ceased, and we went to sleep in a chilly atmosphere. Our lives, already out of sync, continued to drift apart. It seemed my mother rarely crossed paths with Luca. I wondered when exactly he came home. I made sure to sleep before his return, and started my day either before he woke up or after he had left. Indeed, it was a form of living separately within the same household. I begin to doubt what Luca is thinking, and suspicions about Luca start to grow. In this increasingly estranged life with Luca, my mother's surgery day approaches us. What about Luca? Isn't he coming? My mother sighs in the hospital room before entering the operating room. Even if Luca doesn't come, I'm here. Why does she seek her son-in-law's presence more than her own daughter's at a time like this? Am I such a petty daughter to think such things? Suppressing my exasperation, I simply send encouragement to my mother heading into the operating room. Do your best. The surgery concludes approximately 6 hours later. During this time, Luca never shows up. Of course, he has been informed, and he should know today is the day of my mother's surgery. I have to accept that he is probably busy with work. The surgery is successful, and the cancer cells are temporarily removed. My mother will remain hospitalized for a while, and I earnestly hope for her complete recovery. When my mother wakes up from anesthesia, she remains somewhat dazed after receiving explanations from the doctor. Of course, she is pleased with the successful surgery, but she is anxious about when Luca will come. Don't be in such a hurry, he'll come eventually. Oh, Luca, it seems he's had enough of me. What a thing. When my mother, who is very emotional, realizes that Luca doesn't show up, she ends up suspecting that he must be dislike her. Though the assumption wasn't entirely wrong, within my mother's perspective, Luca was still an ally, making her feel betrayed. While calming down my upset mother, I listened to her complaints while she was in the hospital in a depressing mood. A week after the surgery, Luca finally visited my mother. Coincidentally, I was there after finishing work, and I could see my mother's face light up when Luca arrived. "Hello, Mother. How are you feeling?" "Oh, Luca, I thought you wouldn't come." With an expression as if waiting for a lover, my mother makes me feel embarrassed as her own child. "I brought a little something for you, Mother. Here it is." I watch Luca hand a cake box to my mother up close. I felt a chill in my heart when I saw Luca smiling as if he had just pasted his smile on his face, and I quickly took the cake box away from him. When I opened the box a little and checked the contents, I threw it in the trash. "Hey, what on earth are you doing?" Luca and my mother looked at me in unison and expressed their anger at what had happened in front of them. "What's the matter?" I asked my mother, who is trembling as if in disbelief. "Did you look inside the cake?" "What?" My mother started to tremble at the unexpected question, as if she hadn't expected it. I stared at Luca to confirm whether my expectations were correct. Luca's expression twisted in frustration. It looks like I was right after all. I clenched my fists to get back at Luca. "What is the meaning of this, Bella? You can't just throw away a visitation gift that someone went to such trouble to buy." Luca, still claiming his actions were justified, faced me with a defiant attitude. "What do you mean? You know better than anyone, don't you?" I retort to Luca, not wanting to be outdone. Having lived in discord with Luca for a long time, confronting him directly was somewhat frightening. Yet, I couldn't let my mother be crushed by Luca's malice. I don't get it. "Hey, mother-in-law, you should try the cake. It's delicious." Luca picked up the cake box from the trash and revealed a rather ordinary shortcake with whipped cream. It's just a typical shortcake with fresh cream. However, I understood instantly the moment I saw it, but I realized instantly it wasn't from the cake shop. As evidence, the application of the cream was uneven, and even the strawberries on top looked somewhat white and damaged. My mother, unaware of these details, just stared at the cake. Wait, let me have some first. Swiftly taking the cake from between Luca and my mother, I took a bite of the edge. I didn't want to eat it, but I had no other choice. There was no other way to prove Luca's wrongdoing. As I ate, I sensed something was off. First, it was excessively salty, almost making me want to vomit. Moreover, the smell of alcohol permeated, far beyond the usual amount used in sweets. I spat out the cake into the tissue in the hospital room. Seeing my reaction, my mother's face stiffened. This is impossible. What is this taste? Is it a lot of salt and alcohol? Isn't this the worst thing a cancer patient can eat? High salt and alcohol intake is toxic even to healthy people, but for cancer patients, it further increases the risk of disease. What a terrifying thing to deliberately give that to my mother. Luca probably didn't expect me to eat the cake, judging by the sudden draining of color from his face. Did you notice that mom has taste disorders due to cancer treatment? Is that why you thought of this salty alcohol cake? It seems to be rather common for cancer patients to develop taste disorders due to treatment, and I had heard my mother complain that she could not taste food these days. While my mother's taste was expected to improve after surgery, Luca might have known about her taste issues, leading him to the idea of the salt alcohol cake. My mother looked at Luca with complete fear in her eyes. She finally realized that Luca wasn't on her side. Luca, giving up on any favorable impression with my mother, sneered and confessed his twisted motives. What's the purpose of all this? To make the old lady's disease progress so I can get the insurance money. Luca laughed loudly, seemingly finding it amusing to reveal such a horrifying plan. What the heck? Luca, openly declaring his pursuit of insurance money and causing harm to my mother, shattered the image my mother had of him. It was horrifying to see him casually expose such a plan. I trembled. Do you even realize what you are trying to do? That's a crime. Oh, I know. I don't mind becoming a criminal. More than that, I just want to part ways with this old woman as soon as possible. Oh my God. It is clear that the image of Luca in my mother's mind completely crumbled when Luca disparaged her as an old woman and tried to force her to eat poisonous cake. She wore a desperate expression. She's always nagging me to do this or that, and she gets angry when I don't obey her. My life is not for you. Don't give me orders. You make me nauseous. Luca vents his built-up frustration on my mother. My mother looked at Luca with surprised eyes and said, "Oh, no. I just didn't want Luca to struggle with money. I don't care. I decide what happens to me by myself. Don't you dare meddle in my life. Damn it. Now my plan is ruined. What are you going to do about it, Bella?" Luca stares at me as he stomps on the ground. I raise my head firmly, refusing to be intimidated by his snake-like gaze. At the edge of my vision, I saw my mother's small body tensing in despair. "Wait for me, Mom. I'm going to turn this man away. Too bad, but instead of getting insurance money, you'll end up paying damages. It's your turn." What are you talking about? Luca laughed mockingly, still unaware of the situation. There is no way I would counter this way without having something to fight back with. I pulled out a large envelope from my bag and scattered its contents at Luca's feet. I could see Luca's face turn blue as he looked down and saw the contents of the envelope. It seemed he had an idea. In that case, we can cut to the chase. These are the results of the investigation by a private detective I hired. I suspected you were cheating. I was surprised how quickly they provided evidence. So, how's the affair going? Smoothly. That's right. What I had scattered in front of Luca were various pieces of evidence of his affair, brought by the private detective. There were many photos, mainly of Luca with his mistress. It was an unpleasant sight, but seeing Luca, with a smirk, extending his nose and entwining his arm with his mistress, I turned that discomfort into determination. "What are you talking about?" asked smoothly. "It's not fair to do this." Luca, realizing he couldn't escape, didn't try to explain but rather attempted to paint me as the villain. However, I heard nothing more than the howl of a defeated dog. No matter how much Luca shouted, it wasn't scary at all. Cowardly. Which one of us is the coward? You sneak around behind my busy schedule, cheat on me, and then try to do something terrible to my mother. That's impossible. I thought you were busy with your work, but you were really busy cheating on me. I feel like an idiot for worrying about my life between you and me." Reflecting on our past life, tears overflowed naturally. Although our marriage came later than others, I was genuinely happy to marry Luca. Hearing him speak ill of my mother and witnessing our communication breaking down made me sad. The sadness and regret that I couldn't express to anyone exploded all at once. However, even seeing me in that state, Luca only chuckled disdainfully with his nose. "I don't care about that. I was going to get a lot of insurance money and live happily with Sophia. You ruined it, you bitch." Ignoring my feelings, Luca continued to spew abusive words. Sophia seemed to be his mistress. I managed to control my trembling body and tried to retort, but then my mother spoke up before I could. "I've been listening to your conversation. Luca, you're an unbelievable person. Not only did you try to harm me, but what are you saying to Bella?" "Humph, it's your fault and your daughter's fault that I didn't have a happy marriage because of you two. What are you going to do about it?" Luca, no longer the calm and impressive person he once seemed, twisted in an ugly way. His desire to distance himself from both me and my mother was transparent. My mother, growing tired of Luca's unrepentant attitude, finally seemed fed up. "Huh. It's my fault. Do you know how much we've been thinking about you throughout our lives? I've been saving up for you every month, diligently. Bella has worked hard to balance work and housework, no matter how busy she is. How can you do this to us and trample on our efforts?" I could see anger burning in my mother's eyes. Luca took a step back at her forceful words. "Shut up. I didn't ask for your efforts. This messed up my plans. Why did you do this, Bella?" Luca, determined not to lose, confronted my mother. However, it seemed to have no effect on her at all. "Enough. Apologize to Bella. Don't ever come back home. Bella can be happy without someone like you. You piece of crap." "Sorry. I'm so sorry." Hearing my mother's transformed, fierce words, Luca finally fled from the scene. The evidence of his infidelity, scattered on the floor, remained untouched. I looked at my mother. Panting, she embodied the image of a strong and protective mother. "Mom, thank you. That man is unbelievable. Bella, find a better man. Be happier." Yes. While I thought that my mother may have thought little of me, she had indeed protected me. She were thinking about me. Realizing this, tears welled up, and I cried in her comforting embrace. My mother was gently stroking my back. Afterwards, on the way back from the hospital, I went to the municipal office to get divorce papers. Upon returning home, I promptly filled them out and left them on the table with a message for Luca. Luca returned at some point, and the next morning the divorce papers were filled out with the prescribed information, so I submitted them, and the divorce was easily finalized. Luca left home after that. Luca had left the house and probably started living with someone named Sophia. But true happiness seemed unlikely for him. Through a lawyer, I intended to claim compensation from Luca and his mistress for their actions. Considering Luca had planned to rely on my mother's insurance money, he must be facing financial difficulties. It was no longer my concern. I didn't hand over the money my mother had saved for Luca. If nothing had happened, he could have lived without any difficulty with money. He could struggle for all I cared. As for me, life began anew when my mother was discharged. I changed jobs to have a shorter workday and spend more time with her. For a while, I planned to enjoy this simple life with my mother. Even though I still had some way to go in expressing filial piety, I found happiness in being more open with my mother than before.